Again, welcome to the June CounterSketch Solution session. My name is Heather Kutzman, and I am the Tech Support and Training Director at Gemvision. Joining me this morning is Whitney Rogers. She is Stellar's Custom Solution Success Manager, and we are incredibly excited to have her join the team and also the webinar this morning. So I'm going to let Whitney introduce herself and tell you guys a little bit more about her role.
Hi, good morning, everyone. As Heather said, I'm Whitney Rogers. I'm the Custom Solutions Success Manager here at Gemvision. Basically, what that means is I'm here to make sure that you're successful within our software. So, helping you after the purchase to fully implement the software within your business. Maybe you're not sure who to ask or where to go for help. You can start with me, and I'll be happy to direct you in the right direction.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Whitney. Like I said, Whitney is going to be joining us today and for the next several webinars. She's going to start presenting on the webinars and sharing some information with you as well, with the hopes of one day kind of taking over our webinars and being the one to kind of meet with you guys monthly and share content. So like I said, we're excited about having her join us and be a part of the solution sessions. Today on the webinar, we've got a couple of topics that we're going to cover. So we're going to start with our Pinterest to price examples. Again, if you're new to the webinar, this is essentially where we look for trending styles that we're seeing in the market and talk about how we can build out those styles using CounterSketch. And so that will be our first topic of discussion. We have two examples. Whitney's going to lead the first one, and then I'll share the second. We're also going to talk about some versatile classics. So within the CounterSketch library, there are over 1,600 ring designs. That doesn't count pendants and other things. So I know it can sometimes be difficult to kind of navigate the library. We have filters to help you find the styles that you're looking for, but I wanted to present just a couple of really versatile classic styles to bring to your attention today so that as you're getting started in a design process with a customer, if you are basically looking for a variation on a classic, you have some ideas of where to start. So again, not to say that these are the best models in the library, but more so just giving you kind of a baseline of some designs where you can begin your search. Finally, we'll finish up by taking a look at the new designs that have been added to the library recently. There are some really great, I think, fashion-forward pieces that have been added in the last month. And so I just want to call your attention to those. Again, I know that in working in the software, sometimes we kind of gravitate towards the same models because we know those well and we're comfortable with them, but want to make sure that you're also getting some exposure to these new designs and being able to take advantage of those as well. Let's go ahead and kick things off with our Pinterest to price session. Like I said, I'm going to ask Whitney to lead the first one, and this is a little bit about the design that she's going to be working with you guys on.
So the design that I'm starting with today is really just a simplistic engagement ring with a couple of accented bands to go with it. Very much my style. I like simple and stackable. So I like to stack rings, very kind of boho chic. This is the image that I kind of took inspiration from when creating this piece. So to get started, firstly, I'm just going to start with the engagement. To make it a little bit easier, I'm going to go ahead and just search for my engagement. So anytime you have this SKU number up at the right-hand corner of your CounterSketch screen, you can type in to reference. If you have maybe a couple of styles that you work with often, you can just type that in instead of scrolling through the entire library. I'm going to go ahead and double click. So you can see here now I have the engagement ring. There's not too much I want to change about this. I'm going to go ahead into the design stack here on the left-hand side, and I'm going to adjust my center stone shape. So I'm going to right-click the oval, and I think 8 by 6 will actually work for the design that I'm going for. So I'm actually just going to leave the engagement like this and go straight into the bands. And I want to do that by using freehand parts. So here at the bottom, you'll see this plus sign. I'm going to select it by right-clicking, and it's going to open up my freehand menu. I'm going to right-click on shapes, and I want to get something that's pretty similar to the engagement style that I already have on my screen. So scrolling through, this is going to be my best match. It has the shared prong, it's not in a channel, so this is going to be the closest I can get within the software to what I already have. This is going to give me the flexibility instead of starting with a full band, flexibility to kind of adjust and position the stones as I please. So once I select it, it's going to place it right in the center of my screen in line with my engagement, so I can't really see it. But if I hover over the arrows, you'll notice that they highlight hot pink. If I right-click and hold, I'm able to drag. So I can put this band wherever I need it to. So I'm going to pull it up to the top here. You'll notice that I have my grid on in the background. I do like to design using the grid, especially when using freehand parts. It just helps to kind of keep you aligned in what you're working with. Each little square represents 1 millimeter. I also like to toggle through the different viewpoints up at the top right-hand side. So designing in my top view versus perspective view will kind of allow me to line things up a little bit better as well. So starting out with my shape here, I can see that my stone size is a little bit different. So I'm going to come over to the design stack on the left-hand side. I just want to adjust my gem size and my shape so that they match what my engagement has. So I know that they are 1.3. So I'm going to right click and hold and just pull that slider to the left to 1.3. And I actually want my span to be a little bit wider just to give me a little bit more room to create my design. So looking through the design stack, I can see that I have my top profile position here. This is going to allow me to expand or pull these two profiles in closer. So I'm just going to right click again and drag that slider across. That's going to give me a little bit more room and freedom to adjust. Pull it over just maybe a little bit more. All right. And then when I come to the side view, I can notice that when I change the profile span, that I actually moved the shank stones a little bit further down. So now it's not perfectly aligning with my engagement. So I'm going to come here. You can see that under gems, we have the in position. This is going to move the shank stones so I can pull them further down the shank or push them farther up the shank to align with my engagement. So I just want to move it a tiny bit. So I'm just going to kind of inch it over until it's as close as I can get it. I think that looks good. All right, so now that I have my band how I want it, so it looks like it's matching up quite well with my engagement, I'm going to go ahead and start with this design here. So I kind of want to make a V shape. We're going to add a couple of round stones and then some diamond accents and a marquee. So I'm going to go back to my freehand parts, and I'm going to go to settings at this time. Just looking for a standard 4-prong head. And from the top view, they all kind of look like that. You can see that there are a bunch of different options. So sometimes it's easier if you go to your through finger view, you can see exactly what you're looking for from the side profile. So I'm just looking for a standard basket. So here I can see I have a basket. If I toggle back to the top view, it's 4-pronged. This is exactly what I'm looking for. Pull that head into my viewport. Again, it's always going to set that piece right in the center. I'm going to go ahead and adjust the size of this gemstone. So I want to keep it as round, but it's far too large for my band. So I'm going to right click and hold and pull that slider to the left again to adjust the size. Using my through finger, I'm going to kind of position, pull it up to where my band is, and kind of adjust my view so that I can position it. It's my top view just to make sure I stay in line. And pull it over to right to the tip of that band. And now I'm just going to, using my arrows, just kind of right click and hold to position this head where I want it to be. I think I need to make it a little bit taller just so I can kind of keep in line with the ring rail here. So coming down to the left, I can see that gem's height. By adjusting the height of the gem, it's actually going to adjust the setting for me as well. So it's going to give me a little bit more length so I can just better align it so that I'm not clashing with the end of my shape. Switch it over a little bit. Perfect. Now that I have that into position, I actually want it on the other side as well. So I'm going to use my mirrors instead of trying to position the piece again. I'm going to utilize the side mirror option, which is automatically going to set that setting on the other side. Now that I have this in position, since I've adjusted the height already, and I need to add another setting exactly like this, I'm going to come down into my freehand design stack at the bottom here. And if I select this little kind of like a side hamburger menu, I'm going to select this duplicate option. That way I don't have to go in and adjust the size of the stone again. I don't have to adjust the height. It's automatically going to give me the height and the stone size that I need. So again, when I duplicate it, it's going to set it exactly on top, right on top of what I've already created. So to see that piece, you just want to hover over one of the arrows, right click and hold down to drag that piece out. The design kind of has a shared prong setting for these, so I'm just going to try to align it as best I can with the gem I've already created. Turn it in a little bit so that we continue to follow that ring rail. And it doesn't have to be perfect. You can get it as close as you can. Once you submit it into our CAD/CAM services team, they'll make all the finishing touches to make sure everything is aligned and producible. So now that I've got my second stone in place, I'm now looking for those kind of diamond shaped, or kite shaped, I should say, somewhat, pieces to add in. So I'm going to go into my shapes. And the piece I have here is very similar. The piece in my design does not have mill grain, but when I pull up this design in my design stack, you can see that I have the option to remove it. So I'm going to go ahead and just select this checkbox, and that's actually going to remove the mill grain from my design. So going again into my through finger view, I'm just going to slide this straight up, toggle to my top down view to position this. I want to angle it a little bit just to give room for that marquee stone in the center. I just want to make sure it's aligning with the setting that I already have. And again, I'm going to use that side mirror. It's going to kind of show me how much room I have to set my other stone in the center. Just kind of sketch them out slightly. Use my rotation by right-clicking and holding. And I think I can fit my stone there in the center. So again, going to my plus sign, I'm going to add another setting. I'm actually going to use the same setting that I used for the rounds. So this is a great versatile setting as well. Heather's going to talk a little bit more about different ring styles that are very versatile. This setting, basket setting, you do have a lot of options for changing the center stone shape and size. So using my design stack, I'm going to come here on the left-hand side and just select the marquee. You'll see that it's very large here in the center of my screen, so I'm just going to drag my slider across again and adjust that size. Using my through finger again, I'm just going to pull it straight up to align it with the rest of my stones, and then pull it straight out. Here you can see I have a V-prong setting. I really don't want that. The design that I have is more of a prong set. So coming to my design stack on the left-hand side, I'm just going to scroll through and see if I have the ability to change that. So here under prong styles, you can see I have an array of options for changing the placement of the prongs. I also have the option to turn off the V prongs on the corner. So selecting again that checkbox is just going to change that to a standard prong style, which is what I'm looking for. So I just want this stone to be right in the center of those two accents. Kind of going into my perspective, I'm just going to make sure that everything is aligned. So I'm just going to pull that down slightly. And I have my first accented band. So now I'm going to move on to the second band, which is kind of this just marquee half dome band here. So since I already have this shank that I have altered to match my engagement, I'm actually just going to use that again. Since I've already adjusted the stone size, so I have about the same width. Instead of going in and finding another shank or starting from scratch, I'm going to duplicate the one I already have. So now that I've duplicated, I'm just going to pull it to the other side of my piece. And for this band, I actually don't want the accent stone. So I'm going to come over here on the left-hand side, and I have the ability again to check that box and turn those stones off. I also might need just a little bit more room. So I might need to open my span up a little bit more for this particular design, just to give me room to put those marquees all the way around. So navigating again to my top profile position, just going to edge that over a little bit to give a little bit more room. That might work. And since I already have a marquee here on the screen, so I already have this partially set up, I do want a 4-prong setting for this band, but I can adjust that with this setting already. So I'm actually going to duplicate this as well, since I already have a few of the things I need set within there. So again, just hovering over and right-clicking and holding, I'm going to drag this stone and position it onto the band. Going into my perspective view, I can kind of position it a little bit better. So I'm going to pull it down. And for this one, I don't want it to be north-south. I actually want to start with east-west. So if I hover over my rotation and right-click and also hold the Shift key on my keyboard, it's going to allow me to rotate that piece in increments. That's going to ensure that I have a straight 90-degree angle, just so that I can align everything up a bit better. So here from the top view, I just want to make sure that I can see this prong from the top. looking down. So I'm just going to pull that out slightly and then go back into my perspective view just to make sure that I'm aligning with the end of my shank, which I might actually need to pull that shank in a little bit further. So coming at the bottom, you can see you can swap between your pieces just simply by hovering. It's going to highlight the piece that your mouse is touching. And then by right clicking, you can select in your design, here on the left-hand side will update. So I'm just going to pull this over slightly. There we go. All right, and very similar to the round stones when I added them, I'm going to select a side mirror and just mirror that marquee to the other side. Now that I have my mirrored pieces, I need to select the prongs. I actually want a 4-prong because we're going to have somewhat of a shared prong style similar to the first band that we created. So I'm going to come here to Settings Style in my design panel. And I'm looking for a 4-prong where it's northeast, southwest. So selecting that, you'll see that it's updated my prong style on both of my stones. Since these are mirrored, whatever I do to the one will automatically go to the other. Using the mirror options and the duplicate options can definitely save you a lot of time if you're kind of trying to repeat a style or add several stones of the same dimension. I'm going to come down now that I have the stone size as well as the prongs. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate my marquees again. This is going to allow me just kind of fill through my little half moon shape here. So selecting my arrows, I'm going to kind of position and rotate, aligning those 2 prongs so that we have as much of a shared prong style as we can achieve. You might have to do a little adjustment as we continue to add them, but that's okay. It won't always be perfect the first go round. So pulling this part in, zoom out, kind of reposition, so I have the best view. Pulling that in and just rotating again. So now we can see I don't really have space in the center for 2 more stones. So what I'm going to do is just again go back to the marquee that I have within my other band and duplicate it just for the 1 stone. When I duplicate it, it's going to have that 2-prong design again, so I'll just have to go in and adjust the prongs. So now that I have that in position, I'm going to come back to the settings styles and just go to that same prong design. A little bit of extra space, so again, you can just kind of come in, keep adjusting until you get the alignment exactly what you want it to be. And that looks good. I really love yellow gold, so I'm going to go ahead and come on the right hand side. You can see I have the option to change the center stones, side stones, accents, as well as the primary and secondary metal color. So I'm going to come in and just select 14 karat yellow. You'll notice that some of the settings remained in platinum, and that is because they are considered secondary metal. There are a couple different ways you can change this. If you want just to change certain settings, you can come to the setting that you would want to change. And you can actually switch between primary and secondary metal. So if I selected this, it's telling that piece that it is primary metal color. So it's going to transition it to gold. But since I want my entire piece to be gold, I'm just going to come on the right-hand side, select that secondary metal, and also adjust it for 14 karat yellow. So here I have my engagement and my two accent bands. And Heather, I will pass it back to you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Whitney. I love how you incorporated those, um, like you said, really versatile items in this design. So for this one, it's a little bit of a different style. I love that Whitney did something a little bit more modern. I'm going to look at something a little bit more vintage. So we've got a little variety this morning. This one is kind of, it almost has this pointed French set halo going on, which I thought was really interesting. It may not be exactly French set, but that's what it reminded me of when I was looking at it. So that's what we're going to try to use for our components. You'll also see that it's got this kind of two-tone option with a really simple band that it's resting on. And so the majority of our design work is going to be built around this central layout, which uses some bezel set, some what I'm calling French set, and then kind of an arrangement of gems. So this is where we're going to head this morning. I'm going to hop over into CounterSketch to get us started, and I'm going to expand my screen just so it takes up all of the screen size. So for this one, I've looked in the library and didn't see anything similar, so I want to start with all freehand parts for this design. Anytime I'm building entirely with freehand parts, I like to start with a ring rail guide because that helps give me that kind of base that I'm working from so that I know where I can add and take away different parts. For our size, I'm going to leave it a 7, but you can always come in and adjust this as you need to. I'm also going to add a shank out onto our screen. That's just going to be, again, that starting point for our design. This shank here is one that I use often. It's pretty simple because we're looking for something without gems. I know that I can easily remove the stones from this band. So if I look in the design stack, I have a little checkbox here that takes those away. I also want to close up this top span a little bit so that I don't have quite as much space between the two sides of my shank, and so we just want to bring that a little bit closer together. If we go back to our reference image, you can see here from the view of the ring that there's kind of this round base in the center that supports the rest of the design. And so that's what we're going to put in place first. So let's go back to our freehand parts, look under wire, rope, and knot, and within this category we have this really nice kind of, they call it a gem shape, like O-ring, which kind of is funny, or gem shaped jump ring, because it can be any shape that you want it to be. We need ours to be round, so I'm going to leave that as is, but we just want to bring it up and place it near the top of our shank. And if it's helpful, you can always go into that through finger view so that you can see this a little bit better. I don't want this circle or base that I'm creating to be a part of my design if I'm looking at it from a top-down view. So I'm going to go in and make this a good bit smaller just so it doesn't take or grab your attention from a top-down view. So let's take this down to about 5.5 inside and outside because we want it to be a true circle. And I think that looks a lot better for the size and scale. Now that we have it in position, we need to contour it to follow that ring rail guide that we've put out there. So I just click on that little blue box that's associated with this particular ring, and that will take me into my bend option, which is where I want to be. Because I'm already looking at this in a through finger view, all I have to do is left click and drag, and then I can contour this piece to follow my shank. And that looks pretty good. You saw that as I bend, I'm also scaling. So if we need to make this slightly larger or smaller, we can use that bend handle to do that as well. So we've done this in our through finger view. Let's take a look in our perspective view to make sure that we're happy with the end results, and that looks pretty good. So now that we've got our base created, let's move on to our top design. Again, you can see here that we have this really nice pattern laid out. The diamond in the center is similar in size to the rubies that are kind of at the, I would say, like compass points, like north, south, east, and west. And then we have these smaller bezel set diamonds that come in and kind of complete that outer circle of bezel set rubies. So I'm going to focus on these bezel setting options first, and then we'll move out to this kind of larger halo that takes in the rest of the design. So I'm going to start out with a bezel setting. Again, we go to that freehand menu, and we're just going to grab this closed bezel setting for these smaller stone sizes. Now that we have that bezel out there on our screen, let's go ahead and make it a smaller size. I'm going to say it's about a 10-point stone. And again, this is kind of where you want to interact with your customer. Make sure that we are picking a stone size that's going to not only be correct for the design, but also for their budget. So if we want to go larger, we can. I think in this design, the smaller size is probably a good size. So I'm going to go with about a 3.2. And because that stone is smaller, we can decrease the height of that bezel, and it's going to make it so that we don't have quite as much metal at the top and easier to kind of get a consistent height with our halo pieces that we'll add and the other stones that we'll have as well. So we'll start out with this one. I'm going to go to a top-down view and turn on my grid just so I can see all of this a little bit better. So we have that initial stone. We're going to use that duplicate option again because we are using that same setting style and we've worked to get it correct. So that one looks pretty good. We'll place it there. And I need the other 4 rubies that would be at the 4 points of my design. So this is where I'll use my polar array. Just like with Bend, we're going to left click on that blue box and you'll see the little polar array icon appear over here. Left click on that to activate polar array, and now we can use our handles to lay out our design. We want to left click on this blue handle that sets our angle and drag it all the way around to 360 degrees. So we want it to cover the entire circumference of our circle. And we've got 4 in place, which is again exactly what we're looking for to kind of represent those 4 points of our design. So that's a good start for those pieces. We can now head back and we want to add those smaller diamonds that are going to come in between those 4 that we already established. So let's use again that same setting that we are using for our center stone, and we're going to duplicate it. The only difference is this one is going to be a good bit smaller, so we don't need as large of a stone size there. For simplicity, I'm going to drag this stone straight up from center and then to the right to kind of get that placement that we're looking for in between those gems. Now we want to again come in and make that stone smaller. I'm thinking about like a 1.7 probably. So let's take a look. There we go. And again, use your arrows here to move this stone up and over to make your placement correct. And you want it to kind of live right in the middle of those 2 other stones. So just left and right movements to get it into position. Once you have it where you think you like it, you can actually use your quad mirror for this particular stone. With our rubies, we needed to use polar array because they weren't in specific quadrants. They were kind of at the tops and bottom and side. but with the placement of this stone, we actually can use that really nice quad mirror, which is going to make the whole thing easier. So we've laid out our center design here. If we want at this point, we can go in and assign our materials just to make it a little bit easier to follow our design. You'll also notice if you look closely that we have some supporting rails in between these cluster pieces to kind of hold the rubies and diamonds together. So at this point, if we want, we can actually go in and place those as well. So let's hop back over here to CounterSketch, add those rails, and then we'll move in to add our halo pieces. I want to go to my freehand parts, wire, rope, and knot, and the very first option here is just a straight piece of metal. We want to add that straight piece of wire out onto our screen, and then we'll place it to tie our entire central cluster together. Right now I'm in a top-down view. I'm going to switch to more of a perspective view to do this placement. And I'm just dragging it up so that it's around the location where I want it to be. If it's easier, you can always zoom out and take a look at this from the bottom rather than the top. And this again is going to be kind of a designer's choice. If you left these really tall and we don't need to worry about the culet of the stone cutting into this bar, then you can do a layout kind of like what you see here, where we've just got this nice long piece that connects everything. Because I shortened my bezels a good bit, I really don't want this metal to run underneath that setting all the way. I just want to use it as a bridge to kind of connect the pieces. So I'm going to make this a good bit shorter, and then we're going to use that same polar array technique to place it that we made with our original settings. So let's just make this a little bit shorter. It's okay if we've got some overlap, I just don't want it to completely take over the center of those settings so that we have trouble getting the stones in there. That looks pretty good. So again, let's click on that blue box. The first option is to bend. We want to use polar array, so we click on it again and then activate our polar array. And we're going to use those same settings that we did before. So we want to take our angle all the way around to 360 degrees, and we want to keep our count at 4. So now we've got some support for those center settings to stay together nicely. Alright, so we've got those pieces laid out. It's time to come in and add our halo components. If at this point we want to group this center together, we can do that. I'm going to wait just because I want to be able to make the adjustments to my materials. So for this, let's go into our freehand parts library again, look under settings, and within the settings category, I want to limit my search results to only show halo components because I don't want to have to lay out each of those stones individually. I would rather use a halo to help me with that. And we're going to use this half halo option. So again, referencing our image, we're looking to create these pieces, so there's going to be 4 of them total, that kind of outline our central design with this star shape pattern. So we're going to use this piece here, add it out onto our screen, and we'll need to change the shape of this piece as well. Right now it's set to accommodate kind of half of a princess or a cushion cut shape, and we want something that has more of a point to it. So again, we've got that halo piece out there. Let's start by adjusting the shape using our design stack. So we'll left click here, and now you can see we get that nice point to our design that we're looking for. Let's go ahead and just bring this straight up so that it's closer to those design pieces that we're working around. And if we want at this point, we can go into our top-down view and just move it out a little bit. The first thing we notice about this piece is that it is too large. Again, referencing our inspiration image, we want kind of to touch the corners here. We are going to need to go back and add a single stone in the corner, but essentially we want it to really nicely hug these center stones, and it's way too large as it is now. So let's go in and decrease the overall size of this. So we're just going to bring it down to the right, and we'll see that entire halo kind of shift and update based on the size that we need. And again, we can kind of continue to use this slider to decrease the overall size of that halo. And as it gets closer to what we want, we'll start to see it all come together. That's a lot better. Again, you may need to play with your placement a little bit, drag it in a little more so you get a nice connection here between your setting and your halo. We also want to maybe even come in and hide these gems for just a second to make sure that we've got nice contact there, which it looks like we do. We just don't want any hidden stones underneath that center piece. And that's a pretty good spacing. You'll notice here on the halo that I've selected that because of the size that I've selected, rather than ending with a single stone in the corner, we have kind of metal in the corner. And that's not a problem. Again, if we need to, we can always ask CAD/CAM to make that adjustment for us. But what I would rather do is see if I can make some adjustments to the halo itself, either by increasing or decreasing the size of the accent gems. So again, by going from a 1.2 to a 1.3 millimeter, we were able to change the layout of those stones and get a different size where it ends with a single stone at the point, which is more like what we wanted. So we've got our halo, one of them correct. Time to go in and use that polar array again. Click on the blue box and then the polar array icon to activate it. We're going to bring this design 360 degrees as well. You'll notice this is a little bit slower because there's a lot of math happening in the background, but that's okay. So we've got our halo laid out around our design. This looks pretty good as far as placement, so let's go into our perspective view and take a look to see how things look from the side. Overall, this is not bad. I may go in and make some adjustments to my halo profile height. So we just want to make this a little bit taller so that we have a little bit more stability in that center piece. And again, that's up to you. We can increase, nope, I don't want to do that. I want to increase my halo height. Here we go. And that looks pretty good. Alright, so we've laid out our design. This is all looking nice. Let's go in and assign our materials, and then we'll take a look at the overall height of our piece and make some adjustments there. So if we want to use our reference image, it looks like the center section is all yellow and the outside is white. Let me know if you guys disagree. It is kind of a vintage looking piece, so I think that might be throwing off what I think. So again, as Whitney mentioned earlier, we can choose these two different layer colors, but then we may need to go in and individually adjust the metal option. So right now this is on our secondary layer. We want to change this to be our primary. Actually, wait, all of these are secondary, aren't they? So the shank and that supporting rail are in the yellow. And then these over here are yellow. These are yellow. These smaller bezel settings I think are in the white. So I think it's more kind of like this. And then once I get all of my materials assigned, then I'm going to switch them to a group. So I'm also going to switch these to be our rubies so we can apply that. And if you want, you can group as many or as few of these components as you want. So it may make more sense to group them based on material layer. So if I want to choose my halo, hold down Control on my keyboard and select those white bezels, then I can come in and select that first option, which is to create a group, and it will put those components together. And then maybe I want to come in and do the same thing with my center cluster. So again, holding down Control, kind of group all of these components together. And then if we really want to, we can also do that same thing, holding down Control to select the pieces with our shank components. So now rather than several different items, we just have those three main pieces in our design. Like I said, if you come in here, you can, so if we switch from primary to secondary at this point, you can switch the entire group all at once. But sometimes it gets confusing if, say, instead of having this all a single material layer, they were different colors. It can sometimes throw or give you unexpected results. So if I had left these in different layer colors, when I change the group, I might get an unknown output. So I usually like to change all of the colors and then group them. But then you can definitely come in, and once you have a consistent group, switch your metal colors and it will update for you. So kind of a fun feature there. Alright, let's check our height. We're going to go into our through finger view. Right now, if I'm looking at this, it looks like we've got about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 millimeters between our shank and our cluster piece. I don't want this to set up quite that high. If we select our first group here, we can move it down, and then we'll select our second group here and do the same thing and adjust the placement of those components. And it looks like for some reason these bezels are not going with their group. Let me look into that. I'll see why that happened. Alright, so the final step would be to create our supporting work. Again, if you look at your image, there is another diamond placed in here. I will leave it to you guys to do that final placement of the stone, and I'll create just one supporting piece to show you how it's done so we can be sure to have enough time to cover the rest of our content. Again, we're going to use that same piece of straight metal, and we're just going to place it so that it is supporting the points and the corners of our design. So again, initially I'm just going to place the ones on the points, and then I'll let you guys go back in when you go to build this and practice placing the ones on the corners. I'm going to make this round just so that I have a consistent shape all the way through, and we're going to use our rotation to just come in and place this supporting rail. It's a little long for me right now, so I may bring it down in the length just so that it touches but doesn't necessarily cut through the pieces that we're supporting. I also may look at the profile height and width. We may want to make this a little bit heavier since it is serving as a support rail for our entire design. So we'll go into our width and height and make that adjustment, and then we can bring this back into alignment based on that updated size. So that looks pretty good. That may be a little bit too thick, but again, you guys can play around with it and see. Let's do our polar array to place 4 of these under, again, the points of our design. And then, again, we would go back and add the ones at the corners. So we want this to go full 360 degrees. We have 4 of them, and that completes the support on the points. We would follow those same steps to create these at the rails. So hopefully that gives you an idea of how we would create this design. Again, there are some finishing steps you could definitely take to finish up the design. To our PowerPoint again, as I mentioned, I wanted to share some versatile classics with you. These 3 styles are ones that I find myself going back to over and over again whenever I'm building something that's of a more classic style but with a slight variation. So the solitaire that I want us to look at is this style 122574. The 3 stone is the 123886, and then the halo is the 123227. Again, depending on what you're designing, these may not be the perfect pieces to start with, but if you're just looking for a general solitaire with a lot of flexibility, this is one that I would say to definitely consider. So let's go back into CounterSketch. And I'm just going to type in this number 122574, open up this model, and I'll talk a little bit about why I say all of these are versatile and use this one as an example. This particular style, you can see it has these notches on the side of the band. And again, if you're looking for, a non-cathedral solitaire, this is probably not the one for you. But if you are looking for a cathedral solitaire, there are tons of things that you can change about this model. You can add millgrain to the bridge and the top. You can add accent diamonds to the shank and the bridge. You can change the rotation of the center gem. Rather than this setting rail on the side, you can actually change this to a decorative piece, like a little heart scroll work on the side. So there's lots of really quick changes that you can make to this particular piece to change up the overall look of this design pretty significantly with just a couple of clicks of your mouse. And so that's one of the reasons why I have this one listed as a versatile solitaire, because as you can see here, there's just tons of different features that you can add or take away to create just a really unique ring. So I wanted to point this one out. Also, part of the versatility of this model is that it will accommodate lots and lots of different center stone shapes, which again is kind of a measure of versatility for me. There's also lots of different profile shapes, so if you choose not to have those accent gems on your band, there's lots of profile shapes to choose from as well. So super versatile model. If you're looking for a solitaire, I would highly recommend looking at this one first. Again, just out of the sake of time, I'm not going to go through these other 2 in detail, but they do have similar functions in that they have lots of opportunities for different center stone shapes and lots of versatility in adding and removing accent gems. Even in this particular one, you can actually take the halo away entirely if you want. And you'll notice that these are also designed specifically in 2-tone options, and so it gives you a lot of versatility in the way you present the design as well. So those are some great styles if you guys want to jot those numbers down to take a closer look at later. These are also our new styles, so some really great pieces here. I would encourage you to take a look at these models also. To find them in your design library, all you have to do is click on New Designs, and it's going to take you straight to this group. There were some here that I just didn't have space for on my slide, but they're all great, so definitely check those guys out when you have a chance. The other thing I wanted to mention as we're closing up, if you would like, please join us on social media. We are at Gemvision Corp in all of these different social media platforms. We would love to interact with you in those spaces. As I mentioned at the top of the webinar, we also have a recording of today's webinar, which will be posted next week. To view it, all you need to do is go to stellar.com/webinars, and you can log in to watch the recording. As a reminder, we still have 2 instructor-led training options for CounterSketch in 2021. So we have a class in September as well as a virtual class in October. So if you're looking to get those kind of basic fundamentals of using CounterSketch, you can sign up for one of these classes this year. Finally, we have a webinar coming up in July. That solution session will be on July 15th, so less than a month from today. We'll talk about Pinterest to price examples as we normally do, and then we'll do a deep dive into Polar Array. A lot of the designs that we worked in today used Polar Array, and so I know that that's something that you're using often. If you're a little uncomfortable with that feature still, this will be a great webinar for you to join us just to do, again, like that deep dive into this feature and how it works. Finally, we'll talk about the new designs that were added to the library. To sign up, go to that same place, stellar.com/webinars. We hope that this session was helpful. Again, welcome Whitney, and thank you for joining us. Thanks everyone for your time this morning, and we look forward to seeing you on a future webinar.